Call to order the Whatcom Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, April 18th, 2024. Let's start with a roll call, please.
Thank you. Donovan.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Cortez.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Lilyquist.
Here.
Lund.
Here.
Sadhu.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Darwin.
Present.
And do we have Eric Davidson? It looks like he's absent. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item C, citizen communication. Each speaker is allowed up to 3 minutes. Is there anybody online that would like to unmute and address the board? Anyone in person that would like to step up to the table?
We didn't receive any written comments.
Thank you very much. All right, item D, consideration of modifications to the interlocal agreements with the City of Bellingham for construction of infrastructure upgrades of Fort Auto Station for electrical charging hardware. Andy.
And I'm going to defer that to Kevin Ward, Kevin, our project manager. The recommendation is that the board of directors authorize the general manager to do interlocal agreement modifications to the City of Bellingham for construction installation infrastructure at Fort Auto Station to support electric charging hardware for bus and public vehicles. This is an interlocal that was established 2 years ago.
I'm sorry, whoever's speaking, can you get closer to the owl? We can't hear the audio coming through online.
Yeah. This is an interlocal that was established a number of years ago. Is that better, Mayor?
You got the thumbs up from
Yeah,
Todd.
that's better.
There was some cost discrepancies identified pretty early on, and we adjusted the budget to reflect accurate costing to the original scope.
All right, questions, comments, discussion?
I'll just say if I can hop in, that
Yep.
really appreciate the City of Bellingham's willingness when we did that rough order of magnitude back in February of, I think it was 2020. A lot of things changed and cost and supply chain and all those things changed with it. But City of Bellingham, wonderful.
Great. All right, discussion.
I would move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Item E, consent agenda.
Second.
Right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions, comments, further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
any opposed? All right, that passes. Item F, moving right along, reports to the board. Annual safety report, Jeff.
Thank you. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. So yeah, it's that time of year for our annual safety report. And it's kind of our report card for the year, if you will. And so we'll might as well get started here. We talk a lot about preventable accidents, and that's how we measure what we do when the transit operators are out there and we have collisions or we have incidents out there in the field. And the National Safety Council, that's the definition that we use when we determine a preventable accident. And that's an accident in which the driver failed to do everything reasonable to prevent it. We have an accident and prevention policy that lays out a process that we go through when an operator or an employee is in an accident. And what happens is video is reviewed, documentation is reviewed, and then I make a recommendation to the division director, whether it's preventable or non-preventable. And at that time, they will then sign off on it. And that's how we end up with preventable accidents or non-preventable. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. It's important to note that preventable accidents are different than at-fault accidents. We have had instances where another motorist was cited. We were in an accident. They violated a traffic violation of some kind, but yet we still ruled the accident preventable due to the fact that we didn't feel that the driver did everything reasonable to prevent it. So a little distinguishing difference there regarding at-fault accidents and preventability. You know, we spend 10 weeks training operators. They drive 25,000 miles annually, generally speaking. We hold them to a little bit higher standard than the average motorist on the roadway. So the preventability portion of our policy seems to work pretty well, and we will continue to use this with some modifications down the road. So next slide, please. These are required reporting requirements from the FTA. These are relatively new. We developed our safety plan in 2020, and these are statistics that we're required to report on to the National Transit Database. So we have fatalities, and then we also have per 100,000 vehicle revenue miles, injuries, and safety events, and system reliability. To back up a little bit, injuries is classified where anybody in a collision or accident that is medically transported to a medical facility would constitute an injury. A safety event can be property damage that exceeds $25,000. Could be an evacuation for fire from a bus, and it could also include being transported medically, which is why you see one injury and one safety event in 2022. It was probably, and it was the same event. You can have multiple categories checked, if you will, in one instant. So the last 2 years since we've been collecting this data, we've only had 2 major injuries, if you will, and 2 major safety events. These numbers are very low in relation to other agencies our size. We're doing very well. Next year, the FTA has just added 7 new categories to this that we're going to have to track. That would be collisions. That would also be transit worker assaults. And so next year's report will be a little bit more involved from the FTA's perspective and reporting requirements. As far as system reliability goes, you can't really see it on the screen here, but that's more of a fleet type of a metric. It basically measures how many miles we drive in between mechanical failures. Our numbers are very, very low. Our fleet department does a fantastic job of preventative maintenance for our vehicles. I did get a chance to look at some other agencies our size numbers when it comes to system reliability. And I guess I would say that the age of the fleet plays a large role in what that number looks like as far as useful life, that kind of thing. Waco, Texas apparently has a bunch of really old buses because their numbers aren't very good. So that's one way of looking at that. Next slide, please.
Jeff, is there a benchmark for that one or anything?
You know, what I saw, because this is relatively new information, is that 15,000 miles for fixed route was a standard goal, and about 30,000 miles for paratransit. So we're in the ballpark. So the next slide just shows our preventable accidents by mode. One of the things that we continue to look at is 2019 being the year that was pre-pandemic, was fairly normalized with miles driven, number of accidents. I'm sorry I didn't get a total on these, but you can see that we had 45 preventable accidents in 2019. And we have managed to drive that number down, even though miles driven has gone up. We're nearly, in 2023, we're very close to 2019 numbers for fixed route and paratransit. So we did have 31 preventable accidents this last year, which was a slight increase over 2022, but really quite good on the fixed route paratransit side as well. Next slide, please. This is just a quick metric that I use. This is also measured in our agency safety plan. This allows me, as the year unfolds, to look at miles driven and the number of preventable accidents we've had, and I'm able to get a quick number on that and just use that as a benchmark as the year unfolds. So if you look at 2023, it's a 1.0, But if you figure we drove 3 million miles in paratransit and fixed route, and we had 31 preventable accidents, you get a 1. You get a 1, basically is how that works. And we have been kind of driving that down a little bit as our miles driven has increased, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. This next slide is pretty important to us because it's money paid out in the way of claims. This again is also measured with the number of miles driven, but it's really a severity metric for us. And you can see that we've been driving that dollar amount down annually for the last, several years. $1,238 for a preventable accident cost is really pretty low in the world of transit, and we continue to lower that quite a bit. The objective is to reduce the severity of our preventable accidents because that's money we're not paying out, and we can use that money operationally elsewhere.
Yeah. Jeff, I have
Yes.
a question.
Mhm.
This 1,238 is per 100,000 vehicle revenue miles. Since drove 3 million miles, right?
Yes.
So this should be more like 30,000 or something.
No, because I think.
Overall, like this is.
Oh,
per
yeah, you're
100,000.
right. $37,000 we paid out in
Okay,
claims
okay,
for
okay.
2023. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll go with 36. These are two engineers.
Yeah. You guys have the math correct. That's right. So at any rate, we track this pretty closely because it's real money that we pay into our insurance
Yes.
pool.
Yeah.
And it's real money that we're paying out. So next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot. I apologize for all the numbers, but it's just kind of what we do. This gives us an idea of how many miles we've driven the last several years by mode. You can see that between paratransit and fixed route in 2023, we're approaching 2019's overall miles driven number. We're only 80,000 miles less than 2019, and yet we continue to have fewer accidents. So this is a key metric that we continue to follow throughout the year. Van pool numbers are starting to come up a little bit. We rarely have an accident in van pool. They've been doing very good. I've often thought about maybe trying to hire some of our van pool drivers. That might help us. Not to say that our own drivers aren't doing a fine job, but I have thought of that. Next slide, please. One of the more important metrics that we follow every year is our employee injury rates. These are legitimate claims through L&I, and last year we had 8. And there's a formula that we use in order to get this total recordable injury rate that most organizations our size would use. And it spits out a number. 3.06 was our number last year. A very robust number for the year based on the fact that our employee count is up. We also worked 30,000 more labor hours than we did the previous year when we had 11 injuries. But more importantly, the reason I think this is important is that we only experienced 29 days away from work last year with 8 injuries versus 319 the previous year. So by reducing these injuries, we're able to not only keep our employees safer, but they're at work. So that's a big productivity plus for us.
I assume this includes non-accident injuries. Just
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we were talking about accidents.
No, you're absolutely
This is
right.
all
This can be
accidents, right?
a slip, trip,
Yeah.
and fall on the ice in the parking lot. It can be, we had an operator trip going up the steps into his vehicle and cut his nose on the fare box. Yeah, it can be.
So reportable injury rate, so it's 3.06, what? Injuries per something? Injuries.
So the formula that we use is the number of employee injuries times a factor of 200,000 divided by the total number of labor hours that we worked, that we were on the job. And the 200,000 number is a standard figure that we use based on the number of employees that we have. That number, that factor would change if you were a manufacturing plant that had 50 employees. versus the 300 that we have.
Is that over signed by
OSHA.
Ocean?
Yeah. Makes sense?
Main function is to put the RIR close to single digits.
Yeah. Well, so we had 200,000, that's 100 times.
But it's in a ratio with labor hours,
Yeah.
so I'm sure it's just adjusting for.
Well,
labor
but
hours.
a man year is about 2,000 hours.
To give you an idea, we worked a total of 521,000 labor hours as an organization for the year.
That's on my bingo card, I think.
If anyone remote has anything, go ahead and unmute.
I just had some general questions about the revenue miles per year data. In particular, the lack of recovery in the van pool. And I'm just curious how that compares nationally. I'm just wondering if there's, or to other transit organizations across the state. I'm imagining remote work post-pandemic plays into that, but I'm wondering what other factors you believe are causing that slow recovery compared to the other categories.
I'll turn that over to Tim, perhaps. He's the van pool expert, but I think your comment about remote working is certainly valid. I'm sure that's part of it.
Yeah, so I'll just stand up. I think that's okay. Excuse me. So we're beginning a recovery in the van pool program. We had a high, I think the numbers were showing 2018. We're slowly dropping after a high in the mid 2000s. And then the pandemic hit. I think we were down to, 7 vans, van pool vans. Some of that was due to some of the working situation during the pandemic. And now we're beginning to see a recovery at 11 vans currently on the road. And then we have, now we have a wait list of 5 van pool groups. So we've got potential for 16 if we had enough vehicles. We're not going to have enough vehicles to accommodate that. But that's a good indication that we're back, coming back through that trend. I think the state of Washington has one of the strongest van pool programs around the country. Its van pool programs tend to be very, very strong, I think, based on a number of factors. But one of the main things is state support for van pool programs. And we have our partners down in Skagit, which is probably one of our peers that have a bigger program because there's a lot of commute trips going down to the Puget Sound region. And our primary drivers of the van pool would be big employers like Boeing, like BP, and we have Janeke now, which we have a lot of vans now. We have 2 vans serving Janeke. They want another one. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the vans, my understanding of the van pool programs around the state are beginning to recover and have additional demand for groups.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, next slide, please. Here are just some general notes on some of our statistics that we've collected for the year. You'll see that we had a 16% increase in preventable accidents over the previous year, but we did decrease our employee injuries by 27%, which was a big win for us. We're going to continue to work on that. One of the things that we've been kind of struggling with is that we have preventable accidents. We hit a lot of things that aren't moving. We hit fixed objects, parked vehicles, leaving and entering transit stops. And you can see that we had some fairly high numbers for 2023 and 2022. I can say that part of that has to do with the number of operators that are driving with 0 to 5 years experience for WTA. That seems to be a trend that we have noticed, and we need to make a concerted effort from a training perspective to get some more defensive driving training to some of our newer operators, take them out in buses and work through some maneuvers and drills out there amongst the regular drivers on the road. So yeah, 75% of our accidents last year were involving our employees that have 0 to 5 years of driving experience. So that's definitely something that we need to focus on and work closely with the training department. I will add that every operator, or it's mostly operators that are involved in a preventable accident, they do go through a remedial training with our training department. Sometimes they are taken out to the scene of the crime, if you will, and they'll drive through there and try and work on some skills. So that's always helpful. Video is reviewed with the driver so we can try and mitigate future accidents with our employees. Yes.
So I know that whenever I borrow a car or rent a car, it's really different for me because I know the size and shape and the turning radius of my own vehicle. Are our buses, the new ones, are they similar, not just in terms of overall size, but things like turning radius, things that operators would, in a sense, become automatic and dialed in? I'm just wondering about, injury or accident rate based on like buses being slightly different from each other from make to model.
Right. The only difference that I am familiar with as of late is I think the wheelbase on the electric buses were slightly longer than our regular 40-foot buses. So, but it was only a small amount. I don't think it would be enough to throw off a transit operator's general techniques and principles for driving a large vehicle. Other than that, they're all.
And turning radius.
Turning radius, stopping, all of those types of things would be very uniform from bus to bus.
Thank you.
I'll say one of the things too that is our training department has been putting a ton of time into new operators as we've been trying to climb back. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, over 85% of their time is spent on new operators. And so it's the bandwidth of where do you allocate the limited training resources to do that. But Jeff has identified this, and so we're working through how to do that. And as we come back up to where, knock on wood, our operator is at the right level where it should be, hopefully that'll free up some of the training staff to be able to focus continuous training as opposed to just new operator training. That's one of the issues we're working through on this.
Yeah. Dan.
So I'm wondering on the 0 to 5 years, what is of their, you said 74% of their accidents, but what of their accidents are striking fixed objects? What's that percentage? I'm just wondering if that, because we have a striking fixed object percentage of 68. I'm wondering if that 74 makes, if you just took those, if that was higher.
I'm not sure if I understand, like the operator's individual driving record.
It's just a percent over percent. I might just ask you later.
Okay.
If this gets
Are
too complicated.
newer drivers more likely to be hitting fixed objects than older drivers when they do have an accident?
Yes, you're right. Absolutely.
I'm wondering what that percentage is.
Okay. I may have to dig into that a little bit further, but that would be worth noting. Okay. The only other thing I could add today is that we're now required to track transit worker assaults. And I will say that we did have 10 of those last year in 2023, which is disappointing to report on. Of those 10, 5 of those were physical. Someone putting their hands on our employees, being pushed, being shoved, being grabbed, possibly hit. The other 5 we consider non-physical verbal assaults. The year before that, just for context, we haven't really had to track this over the years. We had 7 to give you an idea. But moving forward, the FTA is going to require us to track transit worker assaults and report those to the National Transit Database. And then the last thing I would end with is, accidents with bicyclists and pedestrians can be devastating to agencies across the nation. And I will say we did have 2 incidents with bicyclists in 2023. Neither one of those incidents became claims in any way. They were very low speed, bumped a bicyclist off their bike. No claim was filed, no injuries were received. So we were somewhat fortunate there, but and we didn't have any incidents with pedestrians either, which is a good thing. We did have one back in January of 2022. That claim has not been settled yet. We're waiting for more information on that. So overall, I kind of have to tip my cap to our transit operators out there that are driving around in a distracted world of traffic and people, and they're driving large vehicles all over the place, and they do day in, day out. They really do focus on safety, and I'm pleased to present some of this information that we continue to focus on that, and they do a fine job.
I have a question. Did any of these assaults result in physical injury? Or was it
No.
pretty minor?
They were fairly minor. That's a good question. We do have language in our contract now where people are allowed to be relieved of duty for post-assault leave.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we tell people to go home and relax, and but of the 5, no, we did not need to transport anybody, nor did they need first aid.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's any time loss.
Correct.
Yeah.
No time loss either.
Post-assault leave.
So thanks for hanging in there with me on all the numbers on a beautiful sunny Thursday morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, any other discussion? All right, F2, the general manager's monthly report. Les.
Thank you. So first off, Hayden, we're here. I'm not sure if you've met Hayden yet. Hayden is relatively new, started in January, right? And his specialty is land use. With the comp plans all coming, Hayden is throwing himself into particularly the transportation elements, but comp plans in general, and trying to establish those relationships with the jurisdictions to talk about those things. But one of his other duties is now is the transit access funds. And as you'll recall, the board kindly started with an experiment last year that will continue with the transit access fund, which is designed to partner with jurisdictions to enable complete streets and other projects that would otherwise may not be built that enable transit to be more successful. And Hayden is kind of agreed to give a report on, since it was a pilot last year, and we'll be going out for more projects coming up to report that. So with that, thank you, Hayden. And I should say Hayden is a Whatcom County, grew up in Whatcom County, went to Oregon for a while, and has come back. And
Was in the Portland area for about 8 years, and now I'm back, and it's great to be back. It's delightfully similar, but changed just enough. And I have a short presentation that if I should share my screen.
Yes, please.
Okay. And some of this might be review for board members that were around the past few years, but I'll try not to be too repetitive in what's already been discussed.
It's already a success because you were able to share your screen. You know, it's probably a good idea if you want to take my whole slide.
All right, again, so thanks, Les, for the introduction. My name is Hayden Richardson. I'm a transportation and land use planner for WTA, and I will be taking part in the Transit Access Fund. So just some numbers to kind of justify the Transit Access Fund. 80% of WTA riders walk to their stop or station. There's over 170 miles within the service area that's around WTA bus stops that lack sidewalks. A notable portion of youth, seniors, and disabled populations live without proper access to these WTA stops. And so that map on the left, the gray areas showing are a quarter mile within existing WTA bus stops as the WTA market area. And the blue area are areas that have been determined to be accessible with sidewalks and other infrastructure. And so the difference between the blue and the gray is really the areas that have some sort of disconnect with those WTA bus stops. So the purpose of this program is to improve access to transit, especially for those who require ADA accessible infrastructure. It's also to enhance the first and last mile experience with this population, and to help agencies achieve goals surrounding things like equity, safety, sustainability, and public health. So the funding details, the first time around when it was kind of a pilot program with WTA, the total number was $300,000 for all of the eligible projects that were chosen. And this time around, that number has increased to $500,000. And that's expected to be paid out. It's a reimbursement cost. So the expectation is to be paid out in the 2025 calendar year. There's a $150,000 maximum unless fewer than 3 applications are submitted. The last time around, there were only 2 eligible projects that were chosen, which I'll kind of get into in a second here. There's a required 10% match with the local jurisdiction. And again, the funding is provided as a reimbursement upon project completion. So for project eligibility, these projects are geared toward tribal, local, and state government agencies. So the applications have to come from those local jurisdictions. They must be within a quarter mile of WTA stops or stations and connect to existing infrastructure. They must include improvements for non-motorists. These are things like sidewalks, crosswalks, curb cuts, lighting, things like that. And they don't include paint only or landscape projects. These would be things like simple bike lane markings, bike boxes, shoulder markings, things like that. So the last go around with the Transit Access Fund, I mentioned there were 2 projects that were chosen, one with the Lummi Nation and one with the city of Nooksack. And so I'll just kind of get into the higher detail on those 2 projects. For Lummi Nation, there were a number of items that were kind of lumped in that dealt with, I believe, 4 total WTA bus stops and infrastructure in terms of 3 bike lockers at the Lummi Nation Tribal Administration Center. There were also bus stop improvements and a new bus shelter across the street from the admin building. So the bike lockers you can see in that red triangle kind of on the bottom portion of that map. And then the new bus shelter is on the northern side of the map there. The total WTA project costs for this was $65,000. And there are some photos here of the improvements made. The photo on the left is where the bus shelter will be installed. These pictures were taken before project completion. And then the 2 photos on the right-hand side of your screen were to increase ADA accessibility. And moving on to the city of Nooksack, this project was a little bit more robust and dealt with just one WTA bus stop. It was a sidewalk extension project along Nooksack Road from East Madison Street intersection there on the south side, and it connected with existing sidewalk that you can see on the map. And the total WTA project cost for this one was $265,000. And we were able to increase that. Originally, it was a $100,000 threshold because there was only 2 eligible projects submitted. And here's kind of a mid-construction picture on the left, and then a final construction picture during the project walkthrough that was done. So this included the bus pullout, the sidewalk facilities, the guardrail, and improvements like that. And so the general process for the second time through with this program, so the applications are due by June 28th. So the application will open up, it's anticipated to open up April 28th. So in the meantime, staff will be getting together and discussing just the general process and involvement. And so the next step after the applications are due to WTA, the Project Evaluation and Selection Committee will meet and look at each project based on a certain criteria, which includes the improved access, the community need for the project, ability to fund and administer it from the local level, application clarity and completion, and the history and geographic diversity that the improvements will serve. And at the end, so there are periodic check-ins with the local jurisdiction and myself as kind of the project manager on this one. And at the end, there's a required project update and walkthrough prior to the actual WTA reimbursement of the program or of the project. So that is kind of just a quick and dirty run through of the Transit Access Fund and specific to the second time through. And this is a nice picture of the ribbon cutting for the city of Nooksack. A number of board members were present. And if the board has any questions, comments for myself, I can take them now.
I have one question.
Yeah.
So when you say jurisdictions, each city can determine where this need is. What about the unincorporated area? I don't see in county, we have anybody responsible to see, hey, this place needs improvement.
Yeah.
To be frank, so we
Yeah.
basically dependent on WTA to determine themselves. So who would make that application for that?
So staff could help in that determination, and we're trying to advertise this program to all jurisdictions, but also members of the public as well in our ridership.
Yeah.
And I think a lot, I mean, it could absolutely come from a member of the public that approaches the county that says, hey, this bus stop is either in disrepair or has connectivity issues. And so it might be a good candidate for this program. And so WTA staff can definitely be a part of that process as well and help get that project identified.
I think the other component of it too is that part of this was designed to leverage other jurisdictions that were already underway on projects that may not have been able to complete everything they wanted to.
Yeah.
Nooksack, they couldn't complete the sidewalk. And so kind of a combination. So we can reach out, I think, to the county public works to see what projects.
Yeah, I mean, because I was not aware of this, but I will start talking to
Absolutely.
people that,
Yeah.
who maybe public works or somebody else or public. So
Mhm.
more they know, then they can reach out either to WTA or us to bring it up.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it could be county parks too, if there's
Yeah.
sidewalk bus stop
Yeah,
there.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the other factor is local jurisdictions look at their tips, their improvement programs. You know, that's a good source where we can look at existing projects. Like I know the county had a project on Lakeway.
Yeah.
To improve with sidewalks, so this would be a kind of project where you can look at leveraging those dollars, that particular project, using some different.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, further discussion? If
I
you're,
have just a comment on this. This sounds like a really cool program, but Sapal might remember this. Our former county engineer would say when we see a sidewalk, he sees a stormwater system. So the amount of money to build a couple hundred feet of sidewalk, it's a lot. I mean, I can see how this for infrastructure right around a stop or so, but that map that had all those, the lack of sidewalk in the county areas, that's tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure.
Yeah.
all right, anyone else? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
A couple more things. Last week, Jen, Maureen, and I went back to Washington, D.C. for an annual trip combined with the American Public Transportation Association Legislative Conference on that. So just a few things off of that, and then I'll ask if Jen or Maureen have anything to supplement that I missed. There's a new FTA acting administrator, and she addressed us. Some of her priorities are, she jokingly said, GST, get stuff done. So she's wants to push transit agencies to get things done, and what she means by those things. She talked specifically about mixing transit and affordable workforce housing as one of the priorities. Concentrating a little bit more on rural service, and what does that look like? Increasing investment in bus rapid transit types of systems to move people more quickly and convenient, and then safety as well, both from passengers and employees as well. So those were kind of her priorities Some of the other discussions during a panel from FTA talked about the economic development portions of it and making sure the transit agency had in mind. They being the American Public Transportation Association did a study that found for every $5 invested, for every $1 invested, there were $5 returns through various economic taxes and so forth. So that was interesting and learning. And then one of the things that the acting administrator said, stuck with me, is she said, look at these investments as a down payment on the future and things that are coming our way that we can see how to help us with the environment and housing, all those kinds of things. And look at these investments as a down payment. Representative Larson addressed the group, spoke on the value of transits, particularly the lifeline that it brings, and then also challenging us to look at the value it can bring to the community. I think that, so I took that as we've been talking about community. To meet that way. Some of the other things people talked about were the challenges, increasing costs, particularly from construction, supply chain, bus manufacturer consolidation down to large bus manufacturers, and one of the transit went under relatively recently and so forth. And so that consolidation has been affecting the market as well, plus then the supply chain side. I just went over some of those challenges as well. The speakers were some legislators, industry representatives, and then applicable relevant federal agencies, so Federal Transit Administration, Federal Highway, and it included rail was there too, not necessarily for us. And then afterwards, we met with Representative Larson, and then the staffs from Senator Murray, Senator Cantwell, and Representative Del Bene. And then we also spent some time at FTA talking about ridership in rural and how do you value rides and those kinds of things. So I'll pause there and see if Jenna Marie would like to supplement anything.
It was an amazing trip, and one of the things that struck me was one of the speakers talked about advocacy through stories. That stories resonate with not only legislators but public, and to make sure that our stories are being told. Another thing was transit is for everyone. They talked about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it doesn't only benefit those who need it most, but parents with strollers, travelers with suitcases, people recovering from injuries that may not be permanently disabled but are experiencing, trouble traveling in the moment. So it really broadened my view on who can access transit and who it benefits. Back through my notes real quick. And there was an interesting discussion on AI and transportation, talking about how AI is being used in safety applications, using cameras to recognize objects, cars changing lanes rapidly, pedestrians, things like that. So that was really interesting to hear about that. And then again, like Les said, there was emphasis on rural transit and what that looks like. And I think I heard support from a multitude of people, the need for rural transit and support for that. So if we have projects that are in that vein, that I think would go over well. Let's see. Again, just engaging the public in creating and connecting their communities. That was from Earl Blumenauer. He is a Democrat from Oregon. But again, just making those connections and working with communities, not at communities. So engaging with the public. Yeah.
You don't have to say anything, just
Now we do, because I'm standing up. No, the only thing I would just add is that one of the things Les is always stressing is making sure that our relationships are relational versus transactional. And it's really evident when we're there without an ask this year, but just there to let them know what's in the pipeline, let them know what we're working on, and offer to be of service to them was definitely beneficial. And I can see the value of that over time. And as it was the case when we appeared with Michael last year, showing up with Jen, you know, having a board member there as well really speaks to that we are, you know, committed to this long-term relationship and, you know, sharing with them not just our needs and wants, but, you know, a real offer of partnership. So that was useful too.
That's a great point. I appreciate Jen giving up really 3.5 days to, well, more with the travel day to be there, because it does send a nice message. And we do notice that elected officials like to talk to elected officials. So it's that was good. So thank you for making time. Any questions on that? Okay. Some kind of housekeeping things. State Auditor's Office will start next Monday, the 22nd here. Thanks to Shonda and Aaron for leading that effort. It's a team game. But Shonda and Aaron get to be the front face to that team game. So thank you. Then had a opportunity to have a conversation with the Whatcom County Business and Commerce Committee this past Monday. Thanks to a few of the board members, Dan, Paul, Scott, Michael, who are there. Appreciate that. And you can send me notes on where I need to improve and things to do differently, trying to get better. But it was a good discussion, and it opened some doors from that to have some more smaller group discussions with some of those folks on what we're doing and financing and those kinds of things. So hopefully that leads to some productive discussions on that. And then on the fun side, some upcoming events that the board may be interested in. Tuesday, May 7th, we have our safety breakfast. That's bright and early though. So when I said fun things of interest, but that's Tuesday morning. On Sunday, May 19th, we have our rodeo, which is always a super fun event if you can make it to that. And then Saturday, June 2nd is Sunday, June 2nd, sorry, thank you, is WTA at the Bellingham Bells Day. So we will have tickets and those things if you're interested. Let Genevieve know or
Sure,
yeah. Okay, yeah, and we'll get tickets. So some fun things. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
I have a comment. My office and myself personally have been reached out by Tim Ferriss that they would like to do some kind of signature campaign or referendum or something on the sales tax for WTA. I don't know if it will go anywhere or not. Whatever. We are obligated to provide them information how this process works and what are the ways to do that and everything. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere or not, but I would suggest that that 2-3 of us, and I'll be happy to do that because of where I sit. So, so maybe what we should do, I have met with them twice personally, and maybe 2-3 of us could sit down and have a conversation so that they feel that they have been listened to, and some of the myths they have, we need to clarify that. I think, you know, rather than clarifying in a public arena, if it comes to that, we have to clarify in the public arena in a very different way. I think it is better for us as a board to address this, not in a piecemeal basis, in a formal basis. Whatever they want to do, they want to do. I mean, we can't stop that. But I think that, yeah, my suggestion, if Les, you want to think about that or whatever, we can organize that. And yeah, okay.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Yeah.
have some ideas and some thoughts.
Yeah,
on
yeah.
How to move that forward.
Sure.
So I met with Tim and I forget who else, a couple others.
Yeah, there are 4 or 5 of them.
They're sincere, but they're surprisingly skeptical of public transit. They kind of don't get its purpose.
I kind of wonder if they've ever used it.
Well, I think they expect it to be run properly like a business.
Yeah. But I think that whatever they're coming from, they need to hear back from us, what is the whole mission of transit? And if there are things which we can change, improve, do differently, we listen to from public anyways, and it's open, right? And why don't they come through that channel? We haven't heard them coming through that channel. They would reach individually to people. And I think that maybe we should clarify it by being proactive about it and say, okay, come on down, we can talk to you.
Scott, have you talked with them?
I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because again, you yourself are fiscally
Responsible.
What do you want to use? You watch your finances closely, and you have your own questions about optimal use of money. Did you? What was your impression?
Well, they have, I mean, it's the classic stuff that you hear from buses are going around basically empty.
Yeah.
You know, can we do it better? Can we become more efficient? Can we get more people to ride? And those are all things I think as a board we're trying to push. Can we get more people on the bus somehow? But it's a tough slog.
Yeah, if you remember, even like before COVID, it was 2018, I believe, 19. I brought it up in this board that we start microtransit, we called it, you know, public Uber system or whatever it is, taking its new names. And I brought it up too, because I live in the county that, you know, this is something I hear from people all the time. Why can't we have smaller vans going there instead of the 40 people bus, right? I think a lot of people think about that because that's the perspective they see, what they form, what they see. And I think that that there are things that we have to let them know that as a system, what difficulties and things we face. And how the system comes down from FTA down to us. We are the lowest people on the totem pole, and they were more worried. They thought that this is the sales tax is the only one which is driving WTA, and it is a local decision to have WTA and funded in what way it is funded, right? And I think they don't understand the mechanism for that. So,
Todd?
When we're saying are they organizing a petition effort to put something on the ballot? Because when they start doing that, if they are doing that, we are in a very different position about what we can talk about in a meeting. It's maybe something to ask our attorneys about. If there's a ballot measure campaign and we're talking about responding to a ballot measure campaign, we get in some kind of dangerous waters.
Yeah. Todd, I just want to clarify for everybody that they reached out to me to learn what is the process.
Okay, yeah.
They did not say that they are doing it or it is being formed, but I got a formal request in an email, which is public document. You know, it's not nothing. That's why I want to make everybody aware. What is the process and how, if need to be done, how it can be done.
Well, it's good to talk about.
I'm just saying, them the statute and everything.
If they get to the point where they're filing something, we should figure out what we can and can't talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a timely conversation, and part of the reason why I was glad that Les spoke to the Whatcom County Business and Commerce Committee is that the same group of skeptics was given a podium or a place to present their skepticism to the Whatcom County Business and Commerce Commission. It's a pretty big group with an even larger following that I think is an important constituency. The focus is economic development, business climate. I think WTA could make, as you call it, Les, a really good value proposition. And the value proposition from WTA is not the same as looking at our ledger. And I think they're looking at our ledger rather than our value proposition. So I think it's an important discussion that we need to have in places like the Business and Commerce Commission. And I kind of hope it doesn't come to a ballot measure. I would like us to win that public argument ahead of time. That's it.
Yeah, I would like to say is let's not just dwell on that they are skeptics. I think that should not be our reaction. At least personally, I feel that. I think they are citizens, they're taxpayers, and that's what they've come up with that, and they may not be using it. That's another thing, that are they users or not? People don't have to be users to be asking questions, right? They may not have that experience, what it is for. I think my discussion with them is you're basically missing the fundamental purpose of WTA. You know, it's not a business organization that how many rides, how many miles, how much per dollar, everything that came up in business committee also, what is the cost per trip, right? And I think it is more or less our responsibility to address that.
Well, and I think those things have been communicated to them. They've reached out and, I certainly don't think that we need to help them with the process other than here's a resource, go ahead and figure that out yourself if you want to do that.
Just a question, what kinds of things have been done with these folks?
Well, I know that you guys have been in contact.
It's too long. I need to get, it was last January when I talked to them. I need to get in touch with them again. And then I know that Tom reached out to board members.
So this discussion reminded me of a couple of things we talked about when I sat with him, but it's, the cost per ride is one issue that comes up. And I've been at this 15 years now, and it was in the $2 range when I started, and it's in the $10 range today. So that's 4 times increase in 15 years, cost per ride. And in the discussion, it's like, well, we want to make it more efficient. I said, but the issue, let's say we become 20% more efficient. So we save 20% of the money. What happens to that 20%? It goes into our reserves. We already have tons of reserves. And it's like, so there's an underlying issue is that if we become more efficient, there's no incentive to become more efficient because we have tons of reserve already. And unless we can tell what we're going to do with that money that we become more efficient with, what we're going to do with it within the organization. And so they'll harp on, well, then why would you become more efficient if it just puts cash in your pocket and you're not doing anything? So those are, or paratransit even, I mean, $86 a ride for paratransit just doesn't sit well with the public.
If I may, I think they're asking questions that are legitimate and need to be asked. We're a taxpayer-funded organization, so we owe what's the return on investment. It's a community return on investment, not a dollar return on investment like a private business. So there's a little different mindset. But we, as a taxpayer entity, we should be able to show what is our value or value. And I would respectfully submit that this board is pushing us to change our thinking and how we do that. So when we're looking at the operating environment, how do we put more people on the bus? The board's talking to us about put people affordable workforce housing with transit. That will increase ridership historically as it's looked at. Look at a rapid transit thing. How can we support with waterfront service changing behaviors before they get formed on transportation, as opposed to coming in after there's quote unquote demand, and then people have already figured out how they're going to move themselves around, and then we're trying to break those behaviors. So to the board's credit, I think you are pushing us to do those things that these folks are talking about, and those do take money, and that's how we will spend those things. And I do think there's an opportunity there for them to see how does this work. I'm talking to some of the, not on that group, but many in the business community, individual coffees and things. They agree with where the board is pushing us as an agency to go. But there is some skepticism, like, hey, show that you can do this. If you can do this, that's great, but show that you can do that. And I think that's healthy. And I think we can prove that we can do these things. We've got a great team to do this. I think we can show that value. City of Bellingham just did that housing survey that 78% said they would rather see higher density and more transit in that area or in their areas. So I think there's an appetite. We just need to show that value and how we're plugging into those things. So I used to work for a guy who used to say challenges equal opportunities. So there's some challenges, but I think there's some great opportunities for us to make a real difference in the community then. So.
And I don't want to draw this out too much longer because we're at time, but I think it comes down to what Scott says a lot is it doesn't matter if there's nobody on the bus. If there were full buses passing these people, then they wouldn't be even suggesting this probably. So, and we all know that, like, that's what we do is try to get people on the bus, but good discussion. Thank you. All right.
Thank you for that.
Any other business?
I just want to, I have a lot of WTA drivers that we have paratransit and Linden Hop that access the center quite often. And I just want to compliment everyone we run into and, helping my 99-year-old out the door and carry her bags. And, she's sassy and they're receptive. It's a pretty amazing service, and everyone we've come in contact with have been just fantastic. And I just want to give props to all the drivers and the people that we have to call and say, well, you've just been waiting here for 20 minutes. When's your bus gonna get here? And she's everyone all around the service has just been fantastic. So thank you so much.
Oh, Kim?
I just wanted to say, I have to sign off here because I have to travel to City Hall. But that I've found the previous conversation to be among the most meaningful since I've been able to be part of this board, and that I'd love for our agendas to hold in more space for this kind of governance and thoughtful conversation versus just staff presentation. So I found this to be some of the most interesting conversation that we've had. So thanks for that.
All right. Anyone else? Any announcements? All right, we are adjourned.